Hello class. This video is going to focus on 1.5, which is expressions involving absolute value. The goal of this video is I can evaluate absolute value expressions. And you want to open your textbook to page 45 where you will begin to take notes. Okay, so we have a definition. We have the absolute value of a number is its distance from zero on a number line. Okay, so here's the formal definition with examples. So in words, for any real number x, if x is positive or 0, then the absolute value of x is x. If x is negative, then the absolute value of x is the opposite of x, which makes it positive x. Okay, we are going to start with example 2, where we are going to evaluate the absolute value of an algebraic expression. This is on page 46. So we have the absolute value of negative 2 times x times y plus 5 times y. Now remember, anytime you don't have an operation in between, like a number and variables, that is always going to be multiplication. So you can put little dots in between these. Okay, so that means multiplication. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to substitute. So we're going to replace the x with 6 and replace the y with negative 3. So we have the absolute value of negative 2, and then x is going to be 6, so times 6. I'm using parentheses so I can multiply. And then y is negative 3, so times negative 3. And then plus 5 times y, which is negative 3. And then close the absolute value symbols. Okay, so then the next step, I'm going to multiply. Remember, we always use order of operations when we're doing expressions. So I'm going to start off with multiplying negative 2 times times positive 6 times negative 3. So a negative times a negative is a positive. Let's see, 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 6 is 36. So this whole thing is going to be positive 36. And then over here, 5 plus negative 3 is going to be negative 15. And you can always use a calculator to do this math. Okay, so then we're going to subtract 36 minus 15. And that should give us the absolute value of 21. And then the absolute value of 21 is just a positive 21. So that is our answer. Okay, example 2, we want to evaluate the absolute value of an algebraic expression. This is on page 46. This is the check. So we want to evaluate the negative or opposite absolute value of 5a plus 3 times the quantity 2ab minus 1. Now again, we're going to use a equals negative 2 and b equals negative 3, so that's what we will substitute in for those variables. So I'm going to start off, I have the negative sign and then the absolute value, and then 5. In place of a, we're going to put negative 2 plus 3, and then times the quantity 2. Instead of a, we're going to put negative 2. Instead of b, we're going to put negative 3, and then minus 1. And I need 2 parentheses to close it out. Oh wait, no, I don't need 2 parentheses. I need an absolute value to close it out. Okay, so we are going to start on the innermost parentheses. So we're going to start with this right here, the multiplication. So 2 times negative 2 times a negative 3. Negative times a negative is a positive. So then we have 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. And then I have minus 1. And I'm going to bring everything else down. Okay, so next I'm still going to go with the parentheses. So 12 minus 1. 12 minus 1 is 11. And everything else is going to come down. And you know what? I'm going to do this at the same time. I'm going to do 5 times negative 2, which is negative 10. Okay, next we have 3 times 11, and that's going to give us 33. And everything else is going to come down. And then we're going to do negative 10 plus 33. And that's going to be the negative absolute value of 23. Okay, so then the absolute value of 23 is 23. But we have this negative, so that means our answer is going to be negative 23. So the absolute value was not negative, the absolute value was positive, but because we had that negative outside, we had to include that. Okay, when evaluating algebraic expressions, absolute value bars act as a grouping symbol. Perform any operations inside the absolute bars first. So that means that think of like parentheses. Parentheses are grouping symbols. The square brackets are also grouping symbols. So now we also have absolute value symbols, which are also grouping symbols. So they work just like parentheses do. Okay, so we want to evaluate an expression involving absolute value. This is on page 47. It's number 14. So evaluate each expression if A equals 2, B equals negative 3, C equals negative 4, H equals 6, Y equals 4, and Z equals negative 1. Now, we don't have all those letters in our problem on number 14, but you will be doing some practice with those. Okay, so we have the absolute value of 2b minus 3y plus 5z. So I am going to rewrite that. So we have 2, and then in place of b, we're going to put negative 3. So times negative 3 minus 3 times, in place of y, we're going to put 4. And then close the absolute value symbol, and then plus 5. In place of z, we want negative 1. Okay, so we are going to do order of operations. So we do inside of the absolute value symbols first. So we're going to do this multiplication, and I'm going to do the multiplication at the same time. So 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. And then this is a negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. And then I have the plus 5 times negative 1, which is outside. Okay, I'm still working inside the absolute value symbols. So negative 6 minus 12, that's going to be the absolute value of negative 18, plus 5 times negative 1. Okay, then the absolute value of negative 18 is going to be positive 18. And then plus 5 times negative 1. Okay, now I can do my multiplication that's on the outside. So 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. And then 18 minus 5 is going to give me 13. Okay, so there's my answer. Okay, again, this is on page 47, number 15. So this time we have the expression 15 minus the absolute value of 2 minus 3a. So I'm going to start by writing 15 minus the absolute value of 2 minus 3. In place of a, we're going to put 2, so 3 times 2. And again, remember, anytime you have a number next to a variable, that's always multiplication. Okay, so starting inside of our absolute value symbols, we've got 3 times 2, which is 6. And everything else just comes down. Okay, so next we're going to do 2 minus 6. And that's going to be the absolute value of negative 4. And everything else is going to come down. And then we're going to do the absolute value of negative 4, which is actually positive 4. And everything else comes down. And then we have 15 minus 4, which is going to give us 11. Okay, that is the end of 1.5a. So remember, you need to get a 75% on the quiz for this video in order to move on to the practice.